Hey, what's going on, guys? Today we're going to be talking about the useEffect hook in React, how we can use it, what it's for, and talk a little bit about side effects. So let's just get straight into it. What we're looking at right now is just my app component in my React app. So I just made this with Vite real quick, and we have a div with a button that says get random user, and a p tag that says name, and another paragraph that's age. Inside here, we also have a data.json file, and it's an array of objects that represents 3 people, so each one has an ID, a name, and an age. And we're going to mess around with this data in just a minute, so if you're following along, you can quickly add this, or I can leave it in the comments as well. So let's get straight into it. This is what our app currently looks like in the browser, so it's just a button that does nothing, but we're going to work on that right now. So first of all, before we start using useEffect, we have to talk about effects in general. So an effect is basically anything that React does not have control over, right? So two big ones are fetching data and local storage. So React doesn't have any built-in way of fetching data. We're going to use a regular fetch request, but we'll see a few little unique details we have to take care of, so that way we can fetch data in our React app using useEffect. So if you want to know what else is an effect and some of the examples for that, I'll leave a link in the description that will go into it more, but let's go into how we can use the useEffect hook. So first of all, we're going to import useEffect from React here. Do that at the top of your file. And we're actually going to comment this out because we're not going to use it just yet. First, let's go and do things the wrong way, right? So we want to basically, when we click this button, it fetches data from our JSON file and then returns a random user and displays their name and their age. So let's start with an async function here, and we're going to call this get random user. All right, and then we're going to say const res equals await fetch. And then it's going to be dot slash dot dot slash, and then this JSON file. All right, so now we're gonna say we have all of our users, and we're going to await and parse that. All right, so now in this users variable, we have all 3 of our users here. We have our array of 3 objects. Now we want to get a random index, right? So random index is equal to math.floor, and we're gonna call that on math.random plus, or sorry, times 3, right? So math.random is gonna give us a number between 0 and 1, not including 1, right? So we have an index of 0, 1, 2. For us to access that, we're going to multiply this by 3, and then we're going to round down. That way we get our 0 index as well. So we have 0, 1, 2 as our options with this random index here, which is perfect. That's all we got here. All right, so now we are going to say that we want to save this in a piece of state. So let's go up top here, and we'll just do it in a separate one. We're going to import useState from React, and then we're going to say, very top of our file, we're going to have a user and a site user, and that's going to be equal to useState. And our default's just going to be an array, since that's what our JSON file is. So now we have state for a user and a setter function for user. So let's just set our user to be users at the index of random index. All right, so now this should be setting our state to our user to be the user's array of objects with a random index between 0, 1, and 2, and that should return that object. So now we can go down here, and we should be able to say this would be user.name and user dot age. And then we're going to need to call this function, right? So right here, we're going to call this, and then we're going to go into our browser and we're going to see what's happening here. So let's call this save. And if you see it's getting a random user here, but it's constantly updating it, I'm going to comment this out because I don't want my browser to crash. Right, but we saw right there, it was making request upon request upon request, constantly updating our state that was right here all by itself, right? And if we went in here to our network tab and we quickly uncomment this out, you can see, hundreds of requests are going to be made to data.json. So that's because fetching data is a side effect. So we need to handle that with the useEffect hook. That way we're not constantly re-rendering our component, right? So let's just go ahead and delete this out. We'll keep this for now because we're going to fix it. But let's do a useEffect. We'll uncomment that import. All right, so useEffect, we're going to call it like a function, right? So we have useEffect and then we have our parentheses. Now, the first argument that useEffect takes is a function. So I'm just going to write out our default arrow function. And then the second thing that's going to take in, right, we're going to explain this later, but it's just going to be an array. We're not going to worry about the array right now. What we're going to do is go into this function. And we're going to say basically the same thing. We'll rewrite it though. So we have a we're going to call data, right? We're going to fetch data. So we need to do this with an async function. So you might think that this function right here, we can just add the async keyword onto it, but you're going to get a error here, basically saying effect callbacks are synchronous to prevent race conditions. At the end of the day, it's telling you, hey, you can't do that, right? So how will we handle asynchronous actions? We're just going to make an asynchronous function inside of our useEffect function. So let's call this async function. And then we're going to say get random user. All right, and then same thing that we did in there, we're going to say const res equals fetch, and it was dot slash data.json. All right, so we're making our fetch request. After that, we'll say const users is equal to await. Oh, we forgot the await keyword here. So we're going to await res.json. All right, so our data is parsed now. And we're going to do the same thing here. So let random index equals math.floor, math.random. Then we're going to multiply math.random times 3. That's going to give us an index that's going to be either 0, 1, or 2. Then we're going to say set user to users at random index. All right, so in our effect now, we have the async function that gets a random user. So we're fetching all of our users here. We have a random index, and then we're setting our user state to be the element that was at that random index in our data. So this data.json right here. All right, so let's go to the browser and just see what's happening here. So remember, we have user.name here and user.age, but we don't have any data showing, right? That's because this function that's inside, you can see it's declared, but it's never used. So we have to go into our useEffect, and we're just going to call this function. So now we have Bob, and his age is 47. We refresh, we have Sue, and you can see we're only making these requests to the data.json. Unlike last time when we were doing it outside of our effect, We were making hundreds and doing an infinite loop. Now we're just doing one. Awesome. So we see that it works. It gets all of our data, a random user. Now we want to link it up to do that whenever we click the button. That's where we need to talk about this array. So this array is called the dependency array. A dependency array is basically saying whatever is in here, keep an eye on it. And if this state or whatever changes inside this, then I'm going to rerun my useEffect, right? So basically we need to change a piece of state, and that is going to recall the useEffect every time we click on this button. So your first idea might be, well, we're changing the user. So when the user is changed, we need to do this. We need to watch the user variable, and then when that's changing, we'll just update it, right? Let's save it and let's see what's happening. We're back to that infinite loop, and we're doing, you know, hundreds of requests. So let me take that out. So what's happening here is that we are saying set user inside our useEffect, and then so that's changing user. And then in here, when we have user, we're saying watch for any changes to user and then rerun it. So we're saying, hey, if this changes, redo my effect. It's redoing the effect. It's going down here. It's setting the user. It's saying, hey, this user was changed. I need to rerun my effect. Goes back up top, and it's constantly looping around. And that's how we're getting that infinite loop here. So let's take that out, and we're just going to make like a dummy state that we're going to change. So we're going to make another state using useState, and I'm just going to say button clicked, and then set button clicked is useState, and we're just going to set it to Boolean, so we're going to do false. It really doesn't matter. But now when we click this button, we're going to update that state. So we're going to say on click, pass in a function, an arrow function, and in that arrow function we're going to use our set button click function. We're going to take the previous state, and then we're going to return the opposite of previous state. So when this button is clicked, we're setting button clicked in state to the opposite of what it was before. So this is false. When we click it, it's going to be true. When we click it again, it's going to be false. It's going to be true. This is just a dummy state data that we're using to, well, re-render our random user, right? So now there's going to be no changes. This is not working because we're not watching for it in our useEffect. Now, with button clicked in our useEffect, we're basically saying, hey, run this one time when my page loads. This useEffect is going to run on page load every single time. So it's going to start, it's going to find our random user and set that data, and we're going to use that in our p tags down here. But it's never going to run again unless the value of this button clicked state changes. So we're watching it now, and it's only going to run when that's changed. So let's save, and we're going to start off. We're going to refresh this, so it's going to run our useEffect once. So we have John at 25, and then we're going to click get random user. Okay, it was John again, but now you can see right down here we're making a new request on every click. So this time it's Bob, this time it's Sue. So we're running this useEffect, which is setting our user.name, user.age every time that this state variable changes. So because that we're watching out for the button click state changing, and it's changing whenever we click on it, it's basically saying, oh, button was clicked, let's go back up top, let's find a random user, and let's set that to our state. And then in our JSX, we're rendering user.name, user.age. So that's basically how you can use useEffect to fetch data in React. It's a great way to avoid infinite loops and some behavior that you might not expect. I know when I definitely first started that putting like an async function in there, I felt like that was the right way to do it. but using useEffect, it makes it a lot simpler. And when things change, you can kind of re-render your useEffect, and you can decide in your app when you want to rerun that useEffect. I know this is a lot to take in, so the useEffect hook is definitely a confusing one at first. So there's many different ways you can use the useEffect hook. I'm going to leave some documentation in the description and the comments, so feel free to take a look at that for more information. And then as always, if you guys have a question, just leave it in the comments for me, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. But if this video was helpful, please give it a like, please subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.